Waiters, waitresses, what is the most awkward date you've witnessed at work? Story 1, I am not a waiter, but a bartender, but this particular moment is something I never forget. My shift began at 7 p.m., and when I arrived at the bar at 6, my manager told me there's a guy who wanted to propose to his girlfriend at this bar, and he wanted me to help him with it. I said, sweet, no probs. So the manager gave me a ring and told me to put it on top of her drink. Fast forward to the date. The girl was wearing normal thing you would see at the bar, low-cut top, black skirt, and heels, and the bar was pretty busy. She ordered a Long Island Eulora, so I put the ring on the straw and handed it to him. She had the what the mate look, and then he dropped on his knees. Our manager put on some romantic songs. To my surprise, she threw the drink at the poor bloke and ran out of the bar. Later, I came to know that it was their second date. Story 2, I used to be a server at Applebee's. You know, the most classiest restaurant chain in the country. I was serving what seemed like a normal family, a dad, mom, and their daughter. Halfway into the meal, I'm near the bar, and the dad comes up to me and asks where the bathrooms are. I kindly show him. Then he hands me a ring and says he's proposing tonight. He asked if I could put it on the plate with their microwave chocolate cake dessert and bring it out to the table. I stopped for a minute and almost told the guy to rethink his proposal environment, but ate my words and kindly went along with it. I go to the back and dress that dessert up so much it looked like it came out of TGI Fridays. Delivered the dessert to the people I thought were just out on a family dinner, but were actually out on a date with someone's kid tagging along. Put the plate on the table, smiled, and ran away cringing. I then checked back a couple minutes later. The table is dead silent. They're just enjoying their dessert. No excited emotions or anything. Very normal. Eventually drop off the check. They pay and go on their way like they came in. Go to pick up the credit card slip. The guy leave a note saying she said, yes, thank you, and leaves me a 100 tip. I was pretty shocked, but happy for the dude. I really just hoped the restaurant had some kind of sentimental value to them. Then I understand. Story 3, we had an older lady come in on a Saturday morning. She happily informed the server that she was waiting for a date and ordered a mimosa to drink. About 3 mimosas, and 45 minutes later, we start to think maybe her date is a no-show. The waitress sits down and starts talking with the lady, trying to assess the situation, see if she still wants to order and what not. That's when it gets strange. The lady says that her date was going to pay for the meal, so she didn't have any money, and she wanted a 4th mimosa. Meanwhile, she's cheerily looking out the window for her date. Obviously nervous, excited to meet him, and very talkative. The server asks the manager what to do, so he sits down at the booth with the lady to talk with her. Turns out, her date was Lynyrd Skynyrd, and she had dementia. Edit a word. Story 4, I just clocked in, and my first table is a young guy waiting for his date. He says he's meeting her for the first time and didn't want to be late. What a sweetheart. I come back to the table after 5 minutes and see a girl sitting across from him, her back facing me. I notice she has a slim figure and nice long black hair, and from the back she looked like a beautiful woman. I walk up to the table and start to get their drink order. As I look up at her, I notice a 5 o'clock shadow above the upper lip that had a lot of foundation over it and a very apparent Adam's apple. She was definitely a he. I could already tell he was uncomfortable with the situation and wasn't hiding it either, but they stayed for a beer and finally parted ways. He left me a little note on the receipt after paying. It said, I think my Tinder date is a dude. I also get a lot of crying girls that are mad at their boyfriend. That always makes things awkward. Story 5, I've worked in several restaurants over the past 25 years. The awkward dates, at least in my experience, are always the ones where the girls in these instances 16 to 25 is pretending that she doesn't eat. Usually first dates at Burger King in high school. She orders an order of fries and either gets water or a diet drink. When I worked for Pizza Hut, girls would always order the salad bar, and maybe they'll have a slice when it comes. A chicken wing joint, I worked for a side salad. The guy would always stare at the girl like she's lost her mind. Story 6, I'm not a waitress, but I was at a restaurant waiting for a friend, and I overheard the most awkward date ever. It was a pretty nerdy-looking white guy and a Chinese girl who didn't seem to speak much English. First, the guy would literally not stop talking about his mother. Everything the girl tried to say had be like, oh, that reminds me of this thing my mom said, or, oh, the shirt you're wearing reminds of the shirt my mom has. Then he started quizzing her on complicated English SAT words like fecund, and sounding really smug and condescending when she didn't know what they meant, and he did since English was clearly her second language. The best part was when she asked him if he knew what hegemony meant, and he didn't. She explained it to him, nice and smiling, but obviously proud, which is a non-native speaker. She should be, since most native speakers probably don't know what that means. Instead of acting like a normal person and being impressed, he was super but hurt and was like, well, that's not a word anyone in America uses anyway. As if people regularly use the word fecund It may not be common, but I've at least seen the word hegemony outside of sacre prep class. Then he tried to speak Chinese to her. I'm not a Chinese expert, but my college roommate was Chinese American, and we watched enough dramas in Mandarin that I could tell this guy had no idea what he was doing. The girl kept smiling awkwardly and being like, "Oh, did you mean this?" And no, he didn't mean that. And he was super irritated that she wasn't getting it. He kept saying, "Well, I learned particular dialect, so I can see that maybe you wouldn't get it." I just wanted to slap him and say, "This is probably the prettiest girl who will ever date you. Why are you this up so badly?" I didn't hear the end of the date, fortunately, because my friend came and I couldn't eavesdrop as blatantly. But she did get up and leave less than 30 minutes after getting there, so I don't think she was very impressed. TLDR, white guy with pretty Chinese girl. Talks about his mom constantly. Lectures her about her very good English speaking skills. Speaks terrible Chinese to her and gets mad when she doesn't understand it. I once witnessed a blind date when I worked at a French restaurant that started like this: man, already seated woman arrives. Takes a seat, me, introduces self. Asks what they would like. "Ma'am, let's start with a carafe of red, avec bread." He turns to the woman, "That means with bread." Woman kind of gave this look like, "Oh, God damn it." Story 7. A couple that frequented our restaurant had recently divorced. Hubby comes in with new girl while ex-wife is dining with friends. Well, with thin eyesight, she kept asking me to get details for her, and it was just messy. Guy broke up with girlfriend while they were eating their appetizer. They stayed for entrees and dessert. He ate, she cried. Story 8. I used to have this family of regulars that came in for dinner. It was a man and a woman in their mid-late 30s, and 2 girls, maybe 8 and 10-ish. When they got there, one of the girls would say, "Dad, can we go pick out our table?" And they try to get this corner booth every time. He was a pretty cool guy, but I didn't really talk to the woman very often. Anyway, they came in for dinner one time, and I noticed it was just them. "No kids tonight," I asked him. He gave me the surprised look and doesn't reply. Okay, then. So I went you folks on the usual spot. Still no reply. Just a couple of odd looks. I sat them at a random table nearby and handed them their menus. She looked a little different, so I asked her if she did something new with her hair. The guy just starts getting pissed off and tells me to get them some waters and leave them alone. Well, I looked again to make sure it was the right guy. Looked like him, and I definitely recognized the red minivan he pulled up in. So what was his problem? Then it dawned on me he was with another woman, probably his sister or something, but the ladies looked similar enough, and I barely talked to her anyway, so I hadn't noticed. Well, I felt pretty sheepish when I came back with their waters, got to their table. They're super cozy with each other, and he's whispering in her ear. He gives her a nice kiss on the jaw when he sees me approach, and just stares daggers at me. I don't know what's up, but it's none of my business. I kept quiet and took their order. I went to the server station across the room to ring in their order. He appears like magic a few moments later, scared the out of me. He still looks pissed. I tried to apologize, but he cuts me off. "Don't you say a word to my wife if you want to keep your job." He says, "Oh, okay." I gave their table to another server and told her about my problem. We didn't see those people again. TLDR, who takes a mistress to the restaurant, that'll recognize him, since he's there so often with his family. Edit, I don't think there's a way I could have told the wife. I only remembered their first names, and he paid with cash in his last visit, so I couldn't snoop on the last name. If I tried to look these people up, I would have been in some trouble. It was 8 years ago or so. It's also a very casual bar where we're encouraged to talk to customers and remember regulars. Also, I'm female, which doesn't matter, but everyone on Reddit is assumed to be a guy for some reason. One night, a couple years ago, we had a young couple, maybe 15, 16, who were on a date. It was cute. They were awkward, and I guess they hadn't been on many dates before then. I noticed that they kept talking to the 2 women at the table behind them every once in a while. It turned out that those are their moms. They were on a date, but I guess we're not allowed to go without supervision. I get it, but in a well-lit public restaurant, and the moms had to sit right next to them. What did they think was going to happen? I would have been so embarrassed at that age. Story 9, ex-bartender here. I'm not sure that this qualifies as a date, but it was definitely awkward. It was a slow afternoon shift. Older, balding, slob of a guy comes in. Younger, mildly attractive woman shows within 10 minutes or so. They order drinks. They don't seem particularly interested in talking with me, yo. Get to where you can read these things. So I leave them be. Like I said, it was a slow afternoon, so I busy myself doing odd stuff around the bar. While doing this, I pretty much hear everything they said. Turns out he is a bail bondsman. Her husband-boyfriend was in jail, and she didn't have the money to post bail. He basically offered to cover it if she slept with him. She was crying her eyes out. After 15 minutes or so of pleading, crying, she finally got up and left. To finish his drink and left. I wanted to vomit. Story 10 used to work at a private, members-only country club. There were lots of ladies who came in to eat lunch and play cards, groups of men who played poker and smoked cigars in a different area, a main dining room, etc. A woman who was playing bridge with a Red Hat Society went to the wall crazy one day. Gentleman comes in with a woman, very nicely dressed, this being the normal attire, but they were to the extreme. I bring water, our cheese, and cracker board. day menus, etc. He sits down with her, they order, and I take out their food and glasses of wine. When she goes to the restroom, he tells me he'd like me to wrap this tennis bracelet around her next glass of wine. My manager and I get it looking spiffy on a glass. And I start to take it to her. I walk by the bridge room. Big mistake. Red hat lady is following me, but I don't yet realize it. I'm 2 steps from their table when she snatches the glass from my tray. You pilfering maggot, and dumps the red wine on him, removes the bracelet, clasps it on her own wrist, slaps him in the head, and stalks out of the dining room. Everyone is wide-eyed and silent. I rush to get soda water and napkins for him. As I'm coming back, the woman is getting up to leave. She's crying with streaks of mascara running down her face, and takes off down the hall holding her shoes. He shouts his member number to me and books it out after her. We found out later that the bracelet belonged to Red Hat, and she was his ex-mother-in-law. First wife had passed away, and he was giving his new date her old jewelry, and Red Hat recognized the bracelet. Story 11, a young couple were enjoying themselves. Seems like the dude was pretty cool and straightforward, and she seemed to enjoy his sense of humor. But then the food came. Young man kept talking with his mouth full, chewing loudly, spitting food out onto the table unintentionally, but noticeably, wiping his hands on his clothes. She looked grossed out. She stopped eating, told him she had to use the restroom. Never came back. After a half hour, he got the hint and asked for the check. I really felt sorry for the kid because he didn't realize what he did wrong. My manager owed me a favor, so I asked him to cover the check, told the dude it was on me, and let him leave. Story 12, not technically a date, but a wedding in the Taco Bell lobby at lunchtime. I was the general manager. They both worked for me. They had picked up their checks that morning and mentioned to another team member that they were getting their marriage license that day, but had not made any other arrangements yet. That third team member informed them that she was ordained as something or other and could officiate for them. They decided to go cash checks and come back to do the deal in the lobby. No, it did not last. Story 13, I had 2 men sat near each other at 2 separate tables, both waking for their dates. I fill water glasses and let them know I'll check in with them when their dates show up. Time passes, and both men start looking around and checking their phones. About 20 minutes later, I check in and ask either of them if they'd like a beer. I bring out the drinks, and on my next round, the men are sitting in silence together at the same table for the rest of their stay. Kind of sad, but at least they both had a drinking buddy. Story 14, a couple of weeks ago, I saw a guy at someone else's table who I thought was my friend K's long-term boyfriend. I looked closer, and it wasn't K he was with another girl. I hadn't talked to K in a while, but I thought they were still together. I went up to say hello to B and sheepishly asked about K to see what he said. He told me they weren't together anymore, and he said it with no qualms at all. I was hesitant to believe him because I knew he had done some shady in the past, but I said goodbye to them and left the table. For the record, he and this other girl were 100 on a date. When I asked if he was still with Kay, he said no and that would be awkward for her. Gesturing to his date, he and his date also had a lot to drink that night, 100 in drinks and food for the two of them in a not very expensive restaurant. She had 6 glasses of wine, I think. Anyways, a couple of days later, I saw Kay post a picture of her and be on Instagram, saying how much she loves him, can't wait to marry him, etc. They must have had a real awkward talk after I told her what happened. Story 15 used to help run a very busy pub near me. About a month ago, we had a young guy and girl, 18, 19-ish, come in. They asked for a table and sat opposite each other without saying a word. I sent a waitress over to check on them because they both seemed so out of sorts. She chatted to them briefly, then came and told me they were on a first date. They barely said a word to each other. After we took their drinks order, they both sat on their phones. Not talking, they sat on their phones until their food came out, which they ate silently. After we cleared their table, they sat on their phones some more. To make things more awkward, because I sent over our cutest dessert with 2 spoons and told the waitress to tell them that they're such a cute couple. She did, and they both looked at it for a while. Eventually, they stood up, shook hands, and left through separate doors. They spent an hour and a half in each other's company and exchanged around 4 sentences, all at the start of the date. As we shared the dessert in the kitchen, we exchanged the cash we had put on various bets. Story 16, this was a few years ago. I was out celebrating Canada Day with my boyfriend and his friend from out of town. We met up with this girl who lost her friends, and I offered to let her just hang with us. Turns out she didn't live too far from my boyfriend's place, so she went back with us and had some drinks. Started really getting into my boyfriend's friend. They were making out a lot, and then he offered to walk her home, and never came back for the night. Fast forward a week, and I see her at the restaurant I worked at. She was in my section, so I walked over and said hi, and then noticed she was with some guy. She looked surprised to see me, but didn't say anything. So he asked how I know her, and I just say, oh, we met on Canada Day, not really knowing it was an issue. She then starts to look really nervous. He then says, I thought you were sick on Canada Day. So I leave to get drinks, and when I come back, he starts asking me where I met her on Canada Day, etc. And I'm just like, I have to work. So he'll just be taking orders today. And then he starts asking her, why did you lie? Where were you? Why didn't you answer my calls? She just sat there not really sure what to say, looking like she is about to cry. Turns out the guy was her very serious boyfriend. I want to feel bad, but that girl made her bed, and then my friend in it. We don't talk anymore. Story 17, it was actually a post-separation pre-date between my boss and his estranged wife. She met him there, and they had some coffee while he finished up some stuff. It started casual and civil, and escalated to her screaming at him for hiring attractive servers and questioning his motives. The actual date was rescheduled after a fight. I say her fight because he just sat there calmly trying to reason with her. They got married very young and had 2 kids before 19, and basically she had issues with her body that made her assume he was always cheating when he wasn't. We all tried, but as attractive and charming as he was, very serious about saving his marriage. One job and tummy tuck later that he paid for, they reconciled, only to divorce 4 years later, when she left it for the guy she had been cheating with for years. He joked afterward that he should have had the divorce lawyer ask for visitation rights to the implants. I said he should have asked for one back. 50-50 split is fair, right? Story 18, I don't know if this counts at all, but it was in a restaurant and did involve a waitress. Anyways, I was a chef and recently had become single, about 25 at this time. A waitress I worked with, lovely 40-ish lady, was making it her mission to find me a date as she thought I deserved a girlfriend. So this family comes in. There was this classy-as girl with them, long dress, awesome hair and makeup, maybe 21-ish from what I saw, and I asked the waitress who is that, and she replies, oh, that's so-and-so. Eve known her about 6 months, he'll put in a good word P. It was a small town, so I get on with things, and after the last order goes out, I do my usual see how everyone is doing rounds, and I pay particular attention to her table. I strike up a bit of conversation, and she's lovely, smart, laughs at my jokes, even has a few of her own. Her family seems nice. I leave at just the right time. I go back to start cleaning up, and the waitress is like, why, yeah, I saw that. And I say, all right, see if she has a boyfriend or do whatever it is you do. So the waitress comes back a few minutes later with a funny look on her face and politely informs me that the girl apparently is 14 years old. She fooled both of us. I can only imagine what her parents were thinking while I was chatting her up, but they did seem nice. Story 19, the weirdest would have to have been this 60-year-old dude with what looked like a 16-year-old Thai girl. She might have been of age, but it looked like he found her before puberty did. She didn't speak English, so he was trying to teach her random words on the menu. Then when the waitress came to take their order, he ran away and hid around the corner, so she would have to order herself. She just pointed at 3 drinks and a wrap, all while he watched her from the doorway. He then came back and gave her a standing ovation for pointing 4 times at a menu. The poor girl looked so embarrassed. He was just fascinated with her, touching her constantly and watching her eat with unblinked eyes. I felt like coming over and spraying some water in them to keep them from drying up and falling out with his teeth. Or then there are the dudes that are hoping alcohol will make up for their lack of personality and are speed ordering drinks for the girls, hoping to get a lay out of it. The worst is when the girls isn't drunk enough or hasn't decided whether shell him, and they're just sitting there on their last wine after everyone has left. Seal the deal, man, so everyone can go home. Use all your best lines. She ain't calling you back anyway. Story 20, I work at a fairly upscale Italian restaurant. Easily the classiest restaurant in the neighborhood. Here are a few stories. 2 people in their early 30s walk in. The woman has made a noticeable effort to dress, sound, and look like Kim Kardashian. She is attractive and impeccably dressed, made up. Her date is obviously sweating, wearing gym clothes and tennis shoes with slick back hair. We do table service for wines, so she tries about 4 different bottles and sends them back. She knows absolutely nothing about wine and ignores all the bar suggestions. Finally settles on a sugar-sweet bottle of Moscato. Her date is extremely annoyed and visibly uncomfortable, but she clearly doesn't realize this. She sends back her food twice as well, though the dishes are prepared impeccably. When she gets up to go to the bathroom, her date slips me a 50 and apologizes. They spend the rest of the evening on their phones rather than talking to one another. One obnoxious repeat customer came in pretending to have a speech impediment, which magically vanished as soon as he wanted to order. He laughed and said we fell for it. He bought enough food for 2 meals, as well as 2 glasses of wine, insisting one was for his date. Granted, this was 15 minutes before closing, and the kitchen had closed, so no one really believed him. However, he usually spent a ton of money, so we fired everything back up and cooked his meal. It was a full 90 minutes before his date showed up. Everyone was praying he would be stood up. She was clearly uncomfortable that the restaurant was closed. He pointedly acted oblivious. She visibly cringed when he ordered her food be warmed up, though again, our oven and all of our things were off, not to temperature. It didn't leave until after midnight. We close at 11 p.m. We have a patio. Two young teenagers, obviously on a date, brought meals from Five Guys down the street and ate them on our patio, completely ignoring our manager's repeated efforts to get them to leave. I have more stories from when I worked at a terrible Chinese restaurant. Let me know if you'd like to hear them. Story 21. Okay, so we have these people that come to town all over the U.S. to do roads, clean chicken farms, wiring, ECT. So this one guy becomes obsessed with one of our bussers. At first we think, oh, cute, but then he finds her on Facebook, gets her number, and texts her 174 for 748 times. He tells her how she is an angel sent from above and how beautiful she is. And she just freaked out. She finds out he has a girlfriend and tells him off and leave her alone, or else she's going to tell her. So he just comes into our place of employment and stares at her all the time. Well, one day, he comes in with the said girlfriend, and she is all puppy dog in love with him, and I was stuck serving them the entire time. The guy was ridiculously awkward and kept looking like I was going to tell her 110 would not recommend. Story 22, I worked at a place famous for their cheesecake, and I remember right around Christmas, a little old lady coming in dress of the nines, happier than I've ever seen anyone. I was only hosting at the time, so it wasn't my table, but she told us she had a blind date, and she was so excited. Kept asking us girls if she looked okay, nervously talking to us, looking around expectantly. A half hour passes, an hour passes, and you just see her deflate. She was stood up on her date, and it was just heartbreaking. My friend begged our manager to cut him, so he could just sit and have dinner with her, but it was busy, so they couldn't do that. They did comp her bill and gave her some cheesecake for free, and when she left, she was still just as sweet, but I don't know if I've ever seen someone look so dejected. It was really sad. Story 23, awkward for us, not him. Veteran server in New Orleans here. About 3 years ago, I was working in a nice restaurant in the French Quarter. It was Mardi Gras, and I'm used to seeing some unusual, but not at nicer places. Anyway, I'm going back to the table after delivering food, and the girl is blowing the guy right then and there. She's not even hiding under the tablecloth like in the movies. Bonus, this restaurant has floor-to-ceiling windows facing the street. I wasn't the only one who got to see all this. Story 24, former server. Current bartender, I've seen a lot of awkward dates. Usually just a couple not clicking and sitting in silence, or someone not looking like the profile picture. The worst one was when I had a date get broken up by about 10 cops rushing the table. Turns out the guy was a big-time drug dealer who the cops had been looking for quite some time. He got tackled, cuffed, and taken outside. Meanwhile, I'm standing there holding their food and a tray of drinks. All I could think of to say was, Sue, should I box this stuff up for you? One of the cops came back in to apologize and told me they caught him because the girl had tagged herself with him at the restaurant on Facebook, so I guess always ask your date if they have any warrants out for their arrest before you tag them anywhere. Also, I've seen a lot of dates turn really awkward really fast because of someone drinking too much. I once had a guy who came in already completely faced. He stood up to greet his date, tripped over a bar stool, and face planted. What made it worse was that he just laid on the floor without moving or saying anything until she left. Thankfully, it only took her about 2 minutes to nope the out. He didn't get seriously hurt, just a small cut on his nose, but it was painful to watch. Story 25, I worked at a Japanese-Korean sushi restaurant for a while, and this will always be the most awkward date I've ever seen. It's around 6 p.m., and a reasonably overweight gentleman walks in and sits himself down in a booth. I stroll on over, set down 2 menus because I correctly assume he's meeting someone here, and ask him if he'd like something to drink other than water. Now right off the bat, he asks for a bourbon. And of course we comply, and bring him one and all that. He downs it in under a minute and requests a second, third, and a fourth. I was bringing him his fifth when his date walked in. She was pretty, blonde, heavily endowed in the breasticles, hair pulled up tightly into a ponytail, and smoky eyes. Blonde looks around for a moment, and Mr. reasonably sloshed bounces in his seat and waves her over excitedly. Blonde looks surprised, horridly so, but walks over and confirms who he is before taking a seat across from him in the booth. He's slightly sloppy at this point, cheeks flushed and sweating like a pig. I'm talking very noticeable and underarm sweat right now. We all think the poor guy is nervous out of his mind. You look different from your profile picture. Oh, online dating, first date, and she looks absolutely blindsided. I hired someone to touch it up. He bounces in his seat and giggles a little. Giggles. I thought this woman must have been some sort of saint because she didn't walk out right then and there. I came over to take her drink, and she looks at him, looks at me, and goes right for the vodka. As I turn to go fetch for this poor saintly woman, Mr. Sloshed waggles his hand at me and clicks his tongue. He orders 3 bottles of sake. They hadn't even ordered any food yet, and their bill was already over $150. She sat there awkwardly while he talked exclusively about himself, how important he was, how he was so smart and funny, etc. Whenever she brought up something about herself, he found some reason to put it and her down and himself up. You could see the pain in her eyes as she awkwardly nodded along while he spluttered and slurred his way through another dull story. Finally, they ordered around 50 minutes later $275 worth of niggerai. Let me explain. Generally, the more expensive pieces are around $4-ish each. This would be around 70 of those. It's a fuck ton of food for two people. He had filled out the little sheet that we have to mark down your sushi order with a wave of his hand, telling her that she could try a little bit of everything, the finest of everything from lady, different than any other dates you've been on. I'm a gentleman, and now how to treat ladies right. You could see her cringing inside as he mimed a dramatic bow and did the rude tongue, click to get me over, and oh God, he was drunk at this point, slumping over the table sweating like a running faucet. But still he didn't stop talking, chattering about how horrible American girls were. German girls were better and all. And his date looked German. Was she German? She confirmed that she was in fact Norwegian German. The sushi arrived, the giant hoard of sushi that no mortal man could ever eat by himself, and they began to eat. He quieted a little while putting a piece into his mouth, and when he swallowed, but continued on chewing or not, he regaled tales of his time abroad in Europe and how wonderful the women were over there, real women unlike their American counterparts. And then how wonderful they told him his German was, and how he knew just how wonderful his German was. He brought up some band called Cats and something, and not quite sure exactly what it was, but he attempted to impress her with his knowledge of German right then and there by telling her that it meant cat screams. It didn't apparently. She politely corrected him, and he didn't like it one bit. He awkwardly sat up and screamed at her, screaming how he had so much experience in comparison to her on such matters. This grown man was leaning forward with his palms on the table, right up into this woman's face, and screaming on the top of his lungs how she was a horrible and disrespecting him, how she should be thankful that he even considered taking someone as ugly and fat as her out on a date, how he wasn't like all the other men, and he was treating her just right. At this point, the restaurant was empty besides for them, and the kitchen staff, both sushi chefs and the other waitress, were camped out behind the sushi bar watching this train wreck, because everything else was already cleaned and closed up, but couldn't leave until the last table did. Dear God, this woman had a face of steel, because she stared him right down until he returned to his seat and resumed drinking and talking about himself. The check was requested a few minutes later by him. She requested takeout boxes for the mountain of sushi still left over. It took 3 to fit in all the pieces that were left. He barely even looked at it before paying and trying to discuss a second date with her, somewhere a little more private, by his own words, and she declined very firmly, getting up and leaving with $170 worth of sushi in tow. Mr. Sloshed looked totally blindsided by this revelation, shedding angry tears as he gathered his things and trotted quickly off after her, muttering and other such things under his breath. Never saw either of them again. Story 26 worked at. Couple walks in jeans, ratty t-shirts. Guy pulls my coworker aside, says he wants to propose. They spend 80 of the meal on their phones, barely saying a word to each other. They get like huge meals. We're talking ultimate feast stuff your face. This isn't sexy at all foods. They don't order dessert, so my coworker had to bring out the ring on a free drink that we gave him on the house. Coworker sat it down. Girl didn't notice, too busy playing games on the phone. There's about 10 of us crowded in the exit from the kitchen, watching to see what happens. 1 minute passes, 2 minutes passes. Finally, he must have cleared his throat or something, and she looks up, seems to not notice the ring. He, I guess, asked her to marry him. She just kind of says yes. No excitement. They continue playing on their phones for most of the remainder of the meal. Story 27, I have a few. I greet this couple with 2 kids. Say my usual, how are you guys doing today? The man says great. The wife then looks at her husband and screams, you're such a liar. We're not great. I had a couple, maybe in their 30s, come in. I'm guessing they were fighting because when the guy left for the restroom, the girl grabbed his beer and poured it all over his coat, which was sitting in the booth. I actually had to grab the beer out of her hand. Her response was, hell, clean it up. There was a young couple, maybe late teens, straight up making out hardcore. I'm talking about sucking face. What was even funnier is the girl's mom was sitting across from them in the booth, acting like it wasn't happening.